Okay.
All right, I was refuting the speech of Helen, and it was the original claim she had was that the death penalty has harsh disadvantages, and her original secondary claims were that there's a high risk of executing the innocent, the death penalty is highly expensive for each individual person convicted, and it fails, the deterrent effect fails with the death penalty to prevent any crime. And so under the first point that that there's a high risk of executing the innocent, basically what her point was that if you have a low income below $50,000, you have a higher chance of being convicted of a crime that potentially has the death penalty as a punishment than if you were in the income group that makes more than $120,000. And basically what I have to say about that is that...
That's my timer.
Okay.
Is that this doesn't really have anything to do with the death penalty specifically. It's any crime. If you have a higher income, you're going to afford a higher lawyer and get possibly better evidence. And so does that mean we should just stop trying people for crimes altogether? It's not exclusive to the death penalty in any way. Any crime will have, if you have a higher income, you have a better chance of winning the trial. And so I don't see any reason to stop the death penalty. It's not really exclusive to that. Also, her evidence for this claim was from the years, it was collected over the years 1993 to 1997, which is obviously outdated and can't necessarily be trusted, especially since there were statistics and so they go out of date pretty quick. Her second claim, the death penalty, is highly expensive for each individual person. Basically, she talked about how keeping someone on death row is extremely expensive, and because they have to be kept in high security locations and things like that. It's true, and she has good evidence backing it up that it's true, but it doesn't also mean that it would be just as expensive to keep someone for their entire life. The reason it potentially costs more to keep someone on death row is that they have to be kept in higher security facilities. And if the death penalty is eliminated, these people still committed the same crimes, and so they still need to be kept in the same security facilities. So potentially they'll be kept in the same security, and it'll cost the same amount to keep them. And since they're not going to be executed, they'll be kept longer. And so it potentially has the potential to be more expensive, actually, to keep someone without the death penalty. Also, under that claim, she tried to appeal to emotion in her audience, and she said that the death penalty costing so much decreases funding for community expenses and increases taxes of the civilians. But if you take the truth into account that it might cost more to keep someone for life, or keep someone for life than a regular death penalty sentence, that goes out the window. The third claim was that as a deterrent, it fails to be effective. Her reasoning behind this third point was that according to two sources that didn't really have any credentials mentioned, the states without the death penalty have lower severe crime rates. This might be entirely true, but for it to be a valid point, there needs to be a connection between the fact that there's a lack of serious crimes in the place where there's a lack of the death penalty. Until there's before and after evidence proving that one causes the other, it can't really be taken seriously, because these places might not have the death penalty just, for example, because they have lower crime rates. And so, which came first, the chicken or the egg? You don't really know. So overall, there's several fallacies in all three of her points. Some of her evidence is out of date, and some of her reasoning is not the most logical.
All right, Garrett, the signposting is pretty clear. You summarize each of the points adequately before you get into the argument, but almost all of your argument consists of some kind of nitpicky challenges on the evidence or some explanation about problems with the reasoning, which are not always bad arguments, but they don't necessarily have much weight to them without some proof that there is a reason to believe them. For instance, on the first point, you challenged the data being old, and you mentioned, that it's 94 to 97. Well, I think everybody would agree that's relatively old, but why is the data not descriptive of what's going on in the present system? You need to show us, for instance, that there's been some change that would cause us to evaluate this differently, and you don't really do that. On the argument, for instance, on the second point, I think there's an interesting challenge that you make that the cost is primarily due to security issues. I'm not sure that that's the truth, and this is one of those places where some evidence to back that point up would be really useful. As I've always heard it, the primary cost to the death penalty cases has to do with the appeals process that goes into it, not just the security issues. And I think you've got a good argument there if security is the main cost, but since there's no evidence to back it up, that's a little bit problematic. So they're okay challenges and they're okay reasoning things, but I don't think there's anything that you said in the argument that you couldn't have said a minute after the advocate gave their speech. It's like this would be a good primary response if you were in a debate and you didn't have any evidence. How could I respond very quickly? I think you've got some good examples of that, but you had it almost a couple weeks. I think you could punch it up a little bit, give your claims a little bit substance to them. All right. Thank you.